Good morning and welcome back to your Partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and I'm so glad that you're here today. This episode is sponsored by Christina Wise. Now, Christina is passionate about helping high-income entrepreneurs transform, business income into real personal wealth and sustainable passive income. She's the host of the Wealthy podcast and the author of Falling for Money, and I have that book on my shelf. You can dive into her teachings and insights on her YouTube channel at youtube.com and then look for her name, Christina, Krisstina Wise. Go check it out. Your future self will thank you. So today's episode is all about leveling up your life with emotional intelligence. My guest is Roberta Fernandez. She is a personal and professional development consultant and integrative emotional intelligence specialist. Now, Roberta has worked with leaders and organizations like Target. I almost couldn't say that. You know why? Because I'm in the South. We call it Target. Sam's Club and Optum to help them reach their full potential. And drawing on her experience as a corporate trainer, a master NLP practitioner, and a board-certified hypnotherapist, she makes emotional intelligence practical and easy to apply. And she's here to share real-world strategies to help you lead better, adapt to change, and solve problems creatively. I knew I was going to mess that. Creatively? Roberta, say it for me.
Creatively.
There you go. See, I need her already. Her approach cuts through the confusion, giving you simple tools to build stronger relationships, communicate more effectively. I need that one today, and thrive work and life. So if you want to grow and succeed in a changing world, you do not want to miss her insights. Roberta, welcome to your Partner in Success Radio. It's good to have you here, and thank you for sending me your book, The Emotions Workbook, and it is in front of me.
You are so welcome, Denise, and thanks for having me. I love the fact I didn't know who the show was going to be sponsored by, but it's the perfect person to sponsor my show, right? Because
Right.
I don't care how big or small of a business you are. You don't even have to have a business to benefit from being emotionally intelligent. Because when I bill myself as a personal and professional development consultant, it goes hand in hand. You have to develop personally to develop professionally, and this helps people in relationships. It can improve your life in a lot of different ways. I primarily work with businesses, but they don't have to be targets. They don't have to be Kemps and the well of other companies I've worked with. But a solopreneur will benefit from being emotionally intelligent.
Oh, no
So
question. No question. And I think
absolutely.
as we all kind of grow up a little bit, especially after COVID, when people were having to take a long look at what they were doing, how they were doing it, if they were doing it. People were so frightened and so scared, they had to really kind of go within. And that's why I'm glad you're here and we're talking about this because it's just, I think, or it's just my observation, that's only recently in the last, 5 to 10 years that we have been talking about emotional intelligence and EI, EQ and EI. So
Yeah,
here we
it
are.
started. Yeah, emotional intelligence really has a longer history than that. But like a lot of things, people like the shiny new objects.
Right.
And so EI has kind of faded into the background for a while. But I believe with the advent of AI, I was teaching a class the other morning and we were talking about is knowledge power. And when I originally had kind of structured that part of the course um, a few years ago, it now has a different meaning because everybody can have the same knowledge now. The playing field is getting leveled, and that is going to even be more so with AI. So, how do we as human beings keep our relevancy and are able to maintain relationships? When we look at younger generations, I just did a consulting project with a digital tech company in Boston. And, they have fairly younger people there. The woman that I worked with, who was their chief learning officer, She was a millennial. I think she was probably around 35 is my guess. And she was telling me how challenging it is for her to work with the really young people that are coming in. They are geniuses at what they're doing from the tech perspective, but they have a really hard time communicating and building relationships. And it's so interesting to me when I go into organizations because we still have boomers, right? I mean, I'm technically a boomer. I'm more almost Gen X, but um, and I identify with that generation. But we have boomers who it's all about relationships, business is done on the golf course kind of thing, right? And you go all the way back now to the 20 somethings that are entering the workforce, and that is not who they are at all. And so it's really interesting to see these varieties of attitudes and in the eras they've been raised and what they value and how they communicate or don't. It's really interesting. And so I think the need to understand what emotional intelligence is even greater today, maybe than it's ever been.
Oh, listen, I agree with you. And then you have to tie that into critical thinking, which
Oh,
is
yes.
missing so a lot
Yeah,
of it.
and
A lot of
AI
people
is
are
going to
just
take a
missing
lot of
it.
that away. Yeah, my
Yeah,
daughter's a professor and
I
she
worry
teaches
about
a
that.
critical, yeah, she teaches a critical thinking class and she really sees the problem. Because you don't have to think. You can just go online and ask Siri or ChatGPT or whoever now, what the answers are, and you don't have to think about it. But the piece there that is missing, I think that a lot of people when they talk about emotional intelligence is the motivation piece. So just for the audience that might not really understand what is emotional intelligence, I subscribe to Daniel Goleman's original way of looking at it back, I don't know, in the 80s, where it's about the self and others. And you have what he refers to as recognition and regulation. So the first step is self awareness. You understand your emotions, you have good self concept, confidence, self esteem, and you manage or regulate those emotions with a positive outlook, with self control, with initiative and flexibility. Once you can master the self, then you can look at that person across the table from you and have more social awareness. You can have empathy. You can desire to engage in a very different way. You can understand what they're feeling and then help manage that relationship so that your interactions are more successful, that there's inspiration involved and good communication. And when you can do that, it really is the glue that holds all that together. The why is motivation. You discover your values, you find your joy, there's self-reflection. It's like, why am I doing this? What's the purpose here? And that raises everything to the next level. So when you look at organizations and the pain points that I see in a lot of organizations, I don't care how big or how small they exist. And it's always, you know, wanting more productivity. Maybe there's been poor communication, lack of working together as teams. Leadership might seem out of touch and they're having difficulty motivating their employees. The culture might have become toxic and there's a lot of conflict, turnover, even customer dissatisfaction. The organization may be not providing enough opportunities for promotion or engagement, and that obviously affects retention and recruiting. Again, customer relationships, loyalty might suffer. Stress, burnout. Oh my gosh, we see that in so many fields. And innovation might be on the decline, and people are basically less resilient. So there's a lot of ways, and all of these things that I've mentioned can be positively impacted by being an emotionally intelligent organization. And the study after study shows that a lot of people think, oh well, emotional intelligence is just nice, and it means having this
No,
positive attitude. And
no, no.
and while empathy is part of it for sure, no, it is how do I make the tough decisions? How do I have those difficult conversations? How do and whether that's with an employee or a vendor or a customer or a peer, right? So emotional intelligence can have a lot of soft dollar, which are, harder to quantify benefits, but it also has a lot of hard dollar benefits to a business, especially in things like turnover rate and sick days and HR incidents and productivity in customer turnover and loyalty and employee turnover and turnover. So there's a lot of quantifiable data about something that seems very fluffy to a lot of people, like emotional intelligence.
It does. And listen, for the longest kind of time, I didn't recognize that I was a creative. Turns out I'm pretty darn good at it, but I didn't know it. It's amazing what we don't know about ourselves. And and I always thought, oh, I'm left-brained. I'm an A-type personality. Not necessarily. I switch. I'm like a lawyer. I get on the middle of the fence and straddle it. I can switch between left and right. And so,
Yeah.
but it took me the longest kind of time to finally figure out who I really was and how I do process things. And that was an eye opener, let me tell you, because I
It
found out a
is.
lot of things that I just knew to be set in stone about myself were like, Denise, what the heck were you thinking?
Yeah.
Did you even know yourself at all? And that leads me to my next question for you is 7 myths about emotional intelligence that keep people stuck, because if we don't know ourselves very well, we're stuck.
Yes, we are. And I find I'll address those myths in a second, but I want to comment on the point that you're making, and that is just overall awareness. I have a training called AHARA, which stands for a higher awareness and realization of your abilities. Because most of us, and this is the way our mind is designed, the brain is an incredible structure that automates everything. And that automation keeps us from being aware. Some people might call it mindful, but I don't like to use that term in this context. It is just being aware of what's going on around you, aware of what you're thinking in any given moment and what you're feeling, and making sure those things are congruent because they are super important. Um, the It has to start there, and it has to start with that thinking and feeling. I started out in my consulting career back in 2006 in the field of sustainability. And a lot of times, the company that I worked for out of Sweden was whole company sustainability. It wasn't just environmental, because that's where people connect that word. But a lot of times we go into companies that had a lot of environmental issues, and there was a lot of greenwashing going on at the time. So that was a common entry point for us to go into a company. And what I quickly discovered, and this was my first introduction to emotional intelligence, was that they needed to affect a lot of change within their organization. And people don't like change. And so it became about how do we change the people? And sometimes that meant getting rid of people. It meant I had to get really good at enlisting early adopters and neutralizing some people that I knew were going to sabotage. But that led me down this rabbit hole of emotional intelligence, because you can't change an organization unless the people in it change and they feel valued. And that's what I call integrative emotional intelligence is. It's one thing to understand, what emotional intelligence is and see the graphic and go, yeah, I get that. It makes sense. It's another thing to integrate it into your organization, because knowledge is just knowledge. It's applying that knowledge is where your power comes from. So, as life went on for me, and we won't go into this show, but I became a board certified hypnotist, and I bring really important insights to the table now because working one on one with people in the field of emotions, which is my specialty, it has taught me so much about why change is so hard for people and that emotions drive all behavior. And the primary emotions in a business setting are always going to be first fear and second anger. And if you don't understand what those emotions are trying to tell you, then you'll never be emotionally intelligent.
So we're back
And
to flight or fight.
yes, in a way, yes. And I think people think that emotions, we have this connotation that anger and fear are bad, right? Certain emotions are negative, I should say. Like guilt and sadness and loneliness. We think they're all negative. But there are no emotions that are bad. Emotions are there to tell you that you're not getting something you need or you want. It's like your internal GPS. And so think about this. If you're in a business setting, maybe you're negotiating a contract, and the person across from you, you've been working with them to make this deal happen. Things are going well. You're getting ready to sign on the dotted line, reviewing the final contract, and you see that they're getting angry about something. And this is kind of taking you by surprise. When you understand that anger is saying, I don't think this is fair, it's the perception that something's not fair, you could go head to head and you could respond in the way a lot of people do by saying, "Hey, we've been working with this for 3 months. What's the deal now? I thought we were in agreement all this." And you can get defensive and you can get into this very negative back and forth, or you can notice and understand what anger is. There's something they don't think is fair, and say, "Hey, I can see that there's something here that you think isn't fair. What do we need to do to make this work for everybody?" And now you relieve that tension and you don't have that defensiveness. That other person says, "Oh, wow, on some level, they get me," right? And the conversation heads in a much different direction than it was starting to head. And that's what I mean about applying emotional intelligence, right? But you
And
have to
you'll
be aware first.
you do, and you'll often hear me on this podcast say the best thing people can do most of the time is shut up.
Oh, yeah.
Just stop talking,
Oh, yeah.
stop talking, start observing, and then try to figure out what is your next move. Is it something like you just shared, or do you just say, now I'm a little bit irritated. Why don't we walk off and come back to this? But honestly, your best move is to stop talking.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because over the years, there's been um, so many strategies and techniques for how to be a better listener. And the one I hate the most, that is, I still see it taught everywhere, is to repeat what you just heard the person say.
Yeah.
And I get the
And
point
by the
behind
way,
it.
Denise, it's like, stop it. Just
I
stop it.
know. Well, it seems very uh, condescending, I think,
It's,
especially the way people tend to do it, even
yeah.
they
And
don't
I'm not
mean to
buying a
be.
used car from you. So stop it.
Right, right. And the thing about listening that people don't understand is, first of all, we have to unattach ourselves from the outcome. Because when we are so involved and set on the outcome that we desire, we have now put big blinders on ourselves. And sometimes what happens, if you're really listening and being one in a conversation, meaning you're present and you're listening with your whole body, you're watching, you're hearing, you're allowing yourself to feel, and I don't want to get woo here, but the energy in that relationship in that moment, because communication isn't just about the words and the sounds. It's about the intention and the attitude, right? So it's this overall way of listening. And when you're not attached to the outcome as much, when you can be the observer of that, then you might open yourself up to possibilities you never even dreamed. You might have a huge aha moment where before you were just set on this, well, this is the way it's going to be. It's an either or thing. And now I've just discovered something totally different. So it's yeah, it's very important that when we are being emotionally intelligent, we are actually almost divorcing ourselves or setting ourselves aside from the emotion in the moment, especially when things are heated. It's really important to just kind of unattach from that emotion because emotion drives behaviors. And if you have emotions going on that are not, you know, uh, that are not positive, things are going to take a downward turn really, really fast.
And that's a good way to block change. You're just not going to pay any attention or accept it.
Absolutely. And that's what happens in organizations. I mean, and it's really what's really sad to me is that I started working in the corporate sector and training and consulting, like I said, in 2006. And then around 2013, that's when I became a hypnotist. And it really wasn't any different than what I was doing in the corporate sector. It's just a different tool. I was still working with change and with people and emotions and behaviors, right? Mm. And when I went back, I developed an app called Conscious Napping that I thought would be a great employee benefit.
I
So when I
have
went
it,
back,
and thank you for sending it to me.
you're welcome. It's wonderful, isn't it? Excuse me. But when I went back into the corporate sector, nothing had changed. Here it is 12 years later, and they still have the same problems. They still haven't addressed the core issues. And that's really discouraging to me. But it is because people are not focused on the things that I'm talking about here.
Well, and there's so much noise and nonsense out there about EQ and IQ. So what are the biggest misconceptions that you've come across that keep people from actually developing one or both?
Well, here's the interesting thing. The studies show, research shows that IQ might get you in the door. I mean, intelligence is important in a lot of aspects, knowledge, right? It's what got you into your career, your business, and it is important. But you're born with a certain IQ and it's static for your whole life. You don't get smarter, you don't get dumber. Your IQ is your IQ.
Are you
EQ.
sure? Because some days I wonder.
Yeah, I know. Well,
I
no, we
really
all
do.
have our days when
Yeah,
our neurons are not firing the way that we have
they're
intended
not.
to.
And
But
I'll
but
be
that
having a conversation, say, Denise, are you really that stupid? Why, yes, you are. Then I start
yes.
laughing at myself and it goes away. But I have moments. I think we all do.
Oh, we all do because we're human. We're human beings. We are not perfect robots, right? And that circles back to how we started this conversation. But EQ is not fixed. Are some people naturally more emotional intelligent than others? Absolutely. It comes very natural. And those are the people that are attracting other people. Those are the people that people want to talk to and tell their problems to and feel like they're heard and leave that conversation feeling good. There are some people that naturally have this knack. It doesn't necessarily mean they know how to use it in a business setting. But the beautiful thing about emotional intelligence, EQ, is it can be learned. I mean,
And see,
even
that's what I
even
wanted to ask.
narcissists, even
Right.
narcissists can learn. They may not feel it. It may
No,
not come across as totally authentic,
they're
but
copycatting. Been
yeah,
around those people.
yeah,
But
but
listen,
it helps.
yeah, it does. And with EQ, I didn't know what it was for the longest kind of time. Like yeah, said, I'm A-type personality. It's my way or the highway. Do what you're told. Nobody gets hurt. I was always
Yes.
go, 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 do, do, do. And it really was not serving me. And it took a way too long for me to figure out that I actually do have EQ, but I had no idea what to do with it. So then
Right.
I went deep into it and said, and I'll tell you how that started. It was the darndest thing. My best friend and I were driving to Atlanta, Georgia. Now that's a 10-hour trip. And once you're in Atlanta, it's another 4 hours to get off a Peachtree because it's
Right.
everywhere. It's horrible. And we were talking about all kinds of things. And I think we were listening to, some motivational, inspirational work that she had on her DVD player. And at one point she said, "Denise, do you think that you're a compassionate person?" And I said, "Not really." And she almost stopped the car and she looked at me because it was part of the conversation we were having. And she said, "Do you know yourself very well?" And I said, "Apparently not." And off we went.
Yep.
It was an
And
eye-opener. It really
it
was.
is an eye opener because most people, and it is a generalization, but I'd kind of place a bet on this. Most people are not very self aware. Most
Yeah.
people are not very good at reflection. And all of these are ways to build your emotional intelligence. It's so interesting because it really starts very simple. There's a video on that circulates quite a bit on Instagram. I've seen it multiple times, and I finally got a link to one of them. It's this little boy his mom is tucking him in at bed at night, and she's teaching him about emotions. And he starts talking about how it was a bad day for him, and he got really angry when he couldn't get what he wanted, and then he kind of is working through and talking to his mom about it,
Mhm.
why that was and why he was angry. And then he took a breath and he said, you don't, and the mother said, well, we don't always get what we want. And he's like, yes, I know that. And then daddy got mad at baby because baby dropped his food on the floor. And I told daddy, just take a breath and think about it. And it's just the sweetest video, but it really hit home with me because when I was in Minneapolis, I worked a lot. I did a lot of training in the medical field. There's a lot of medical tech companies and really good healthcare systems in Minneapolis. And I was doing a training for 500 people who were pulmonary and cardiovascular specialists. And in the keynote, I started my conversation by saying, raise your hand if you can remember that really uncomfortable conversation you had with your parents about the birds and the bees. And, everybody's laughing and raising their hand and, it dies down. And then I said, okay, raise your hand if you remember that conversation that you had with your parents about emotions. And there were 500 people in this room, and it was just like you could have heard a pin drop. And
I bet
then you
none of them
started
raised their
hearing,
hands.
no. And then
That
it was
never
this
happened
like,
in my home.
doesn't
We were
happen to
raised by
anybody.
wolves, really.
Yes, because people didn't want to talk about them, right?
Right.
And today I see younger parents educating their children in schools, talking about mindfulness and breathing. And I know that sounds all woo, but it is not. It is based in hard science that when we breathe in a certain way, we stimulate our parasympathetic nervous system. It organically calms us down. When we are calm, we are not, we have more clarity, we make better decisions. I mean, all of these things, and this is why people think emotional intelligence is fluff, but emotion drives behavior. And I can tell you as a hypnotist, when someone walks in my door, they are all in my office for exactly the same reason. They come in with very different symptoms. They may be having relationship issues. They might be in grief. They might want to stop smoking. I don't know. They're just all over the board. But the reason they're there is exactly the same. There is a disconnect between what they consciously want and what their subconscious mind believes is possible. And this is a conflict that every single person faces within themselves at some point in their life about something, and it happens more often than what you think. And so, if it's happening in people, people make up companies. And it happens within organizations. And I saw this clearly in my consulting days, and I see it clearly now as I am back in that market training specifically around organizational change and emotional intelligence because emotions drive people's behaviors.
They
So
do,
we
and I'm
we
so
have
glad
to.
that you brought up subconscious because listen, there's something that I do every night before I go to sleep. Well, I don't sleep all the time. I Sleeping is something that I hit and miss. I'm not an insomniac. I just don't require much sleep, and frankly, it cuts into my reading time, so I don't do much of it. But I learned, or I taught myself when I was way young, that if something was bothering me, and this is before I understood anything about EQ or IQ, I was just young enough to not have any real idea of what I was asking for, so it didn't worry me. But when I am finally going to go to sleep, no matter what time it might be 11, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, but I can tell I'm actually going to go to sleep. And I will turn over whatever it is that's bothering me out loud. I say it out loud. And I'll say, listen, I had, this issue today that I cannot wrap my head around it. I don't know what the answer is. And I turn it over to my subconscious literally for review. At 3:18, I wake up, I turn on the light, I grab my pen and I write it down because it was delivered.
Hmm. And that is always the way it happens. And I will tell you, this was something that um, I don't necessarily talk a lot about in the corporate sector. I don't talk about hypnosis because it's not, the lawyers don't like it. They think it's like, oh, we're going
Mhm.
to control you. God, if I had that kind of
Right.
power, I wouldn't be on your show, Denise, right? Like, and I would
Oh,
be
I'm
running the
hurt.
world. I would
I'm
be running
hurt.
the world, and the world would be a beautiful place, right? But,
There you go.
I don't have that kind of power. But the subconscious mind is super powerful. I was really lucky to have been trained by who I consider to be probably the most amazing hypnotherapist ever. And that's debatable, obviously. People have their favorites, but Jerry Kine was his name, and he's passed now. But he he used to say, "You have to trust the subconscious mind.
Mhm.
It knows what the problem is, and it knows how to fix it." And every single client I have ever had proves that to me. And here's why. Here's why. If we just take a really simplified look, and this all relates to emotional intelligence, it's everything I do is founded and perceived from that perspective. And here's why. The conscious mind is a very tiny portion of our brain's computing power, if we use that for a metaphor. And this is scientifically determined by a biologist back in, oh my gosh, probably the late 70s, by the name of Bruce Lipton. He was a biologist. And about
Yeah,
5% of our
I see
processing
him
power.
on, I see him on YouTube all the time.
Yeah, he's amazing. And so, but at the time, he was a very controversial scientist because he showed, at the time, it was the most important part of a cell is the nucleus. That's what I was taught when I was growing up in high school. And he blew that all out of the water. And his discoveries led to the fact that cells have memory, right? And so, without getting into that stuff, what he also determined is that when it comes to our brain's processing power, our consciousness, which is what we think is the bomb that drives everything, is only about 5% of our computing power. It can only take in on a game day 7 to 9 things at a time. And after that, when you try to start focusing on more than that, quality starts to erode, things slip through, and quality degrades. So where our real power is in the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind, well, our conscious mind is logical, decision making, short term memory, willpower, all of that is conscious, right? Our need to reason and figure things out. In the subconscious mind is where all of our long term memories are, our learning, everything that we have learned, that we've touched, seen, tasted, done, smelled, heard, it's all there. It is home to our emotions, which is, as I've said several times now, drive our behavior. It is home to our imagination. It is home to our beliefs and rules about life. And this is 95% of our brain's computing power. It's the part that runs every system in our body and taking in immeasurable amounts of data, hundreds of thousands of things in a second, most of which we're unaware of. This is where our real power is. And when you can tap into that, when you can get the two of those things that do not communicate very well with each other, the only way the subconscious mind really has a way of directly communicating with the conscious mind is through the body. So, for example, what I mean by that, when we have the emotion of sadness, we experience tears. When we have the emotion of fear created in the subconscious mind, and it wants to communicate it to the conscious mind, hey, you should be afraid. You're walking down a dark alley. Maybe your heart starts to palpitate or the hair goes up on the back of your neck. That is how it's communicating what emotion it is creating. And so this need to understand, number one, how the brain works with your conscious and your subconscious mind is critically important, because if I am sitting across the table from someone who is very analytical and logical thinking, and I am more on the emotional side, there can be an automatic uh, conflict there, right? And how we're not understanding each other. But if I am emotionally intelligent, whether I'm the emotional person or the analytical person, if I can learn to recognize, understand and recognize emotions in other people, then I can then have better relationships and relate to them differently. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Keep going. I'm writing down
And then
notes.
Yeah, so and then there's one other part that I teach as a hypnotist, and in my classes, I teach all of this to people, how the brain is structured, conscious versus subconscious. And then the other thing I learned the first day of hypnosis class was called the four laws of the mind. And it was so impactful to me that it's what I named my hypnosis practice. It's FAIR, Fare. And FAIR is an acronym for how the mind processes everything. It is focus. What you focus on expands. You get more of it. So if you're not getting the results you want, you better look at what you're looking at, right? The A is associate. This is where we set up triggers, good ones and bad ones. When we're focused on something and we start attaching everything to that area of focus, all those things become triggers. And, we obviously, I'm a hypnotist, I'm working with negative things, people wanting to solve problems. People set up a lot of triggers. It can be sounds, it could be smells, it could be certain people, it could be a song, it could be movies, will trigger emotions or their focus in a wrong area. The R is for repetition. When we repeat something over and over again, especially with passion, it becomes who we are. It becomes a deep seated belief. And then the E is expectation. We get exactly what we expect we will. So when we look at the world today and how divided the world is, we have people with deeply embedded belief systems that they have heard the same thing over and over again. It is their focus. They think about it all the time. They have developed a lot of triggers around it, and it has become a deeply embedded belief system. They get exactly what they expect they will. They see that thing everywhere, everywhere. And when we understand that's how the mind works, then we can start to make change in a much more effective way. Do I need to look at where the focus is? Do I need to try to change some of these triggers or create better, more positive ones? Do I need to start repeating something? You mentioned a little while ago, because I'm a good listener, you said sometimes you beat yourself up with how stupid you are or whatever,
Well,
right?
yeah, only
That,
on Tuesdays and Fridays.
okay, well, that's good. It's not every
Yeah,
day
I
of the
have
week.
no, I
However,
have a
on
system.
on Tuesdays and Fridays, You are giving yourself the most powerful suggestion that you'll ever get. They don't come from a hypnotist, these suggestions. The most powerful suggestions anyone ever gets are the ones they give themselves. So if you were, whatever comes after I am is your belief about who you are. And when you do that, when you focus on it, when you repeat it, when you're passionate about it, it becomes your belief and you get what you expect you will. So we have to be, let's circle back to where we started, aware of our thoughts and aware of our feelings and how we are dealing with all of them. And that is the beginning of being emotionally intelligent. So you see
I
how all this fits in, right?
oh,
Like it's
I
all
do.
connected.
I do. And, pretty much everything you're talking about, I have already done or I continue to do. And I'm autodidactic. I tend to I teach myself almost everything. I will fight with my nav system. She's not the boss of me. So it's difficult. I'm untrainable, basically, is what I'm saying, which is not really true. But sometimes it kind of is because I need to do things my own way. And somewhere along the line, I figured out that to do things my own way, I needed to delve into my subconscious because that's where everything was. And
That's where your
these
belief system is.
right,
Yes.
and I don't even know how I knew that. I just knew it instinctively and started digging around in there, and now I'm in there all the time. And when I say I don't sleep, I really don't. I might sleep 3, maybe 5 hours at night, but never in a row. I may wake up, 2 hours later after I've gone to sleep, and I've been known to get up and start cooking a gumbo. I mean, I or make a beeline to my office and start building a website. I just don't need that much sleep. So when I tell you, when I say, okay, subconscious, let's talk about this, that may be multiple times a night. It's not just
Yeah.
once. So I've
Yep.
trained myself over many, many years to just say, okay, what's going on? What do we know? And
Well,
it's fascinating.
there's a scientific reason for what you're saying. When you go to sleep, your conscious mind is literally asleep.
Asleep, right. And I've
Correct.
noticed.
The executive function stops. There is no logic. There is no reasoning. There is no judgment. There is none of that. The only thing that never shuts down in your brain is your subconscious mind. It's always going. And so it is easy then to not have that judgment. It's easy as you're consolidating memories when you're sleeping and then it's determining, what's going to go into that long-term memory bank somewhere in our body or mind, whatever. And determining what's important for you to hang on to. Um, all of this is going on, and there's no interruption by your conscious mind saying, "Oh, come on, that's pretty stupid," or "That's not very reasonable," or whatever it's going to say, right? So that's subconscious mind. It, like I say, it's your powerhouse. It is what determines how you process everything. And we have the misinformed opinion that our conscious mind is the because it's the only time we're awake and aware, right? But the really important stuff is happening on a whole different level. And the reason why I'm a hypnotist is because hypnosis is a really great and efficient way to get into that subconscious mind and
Understood.
bring those things out to the consciousness. Because your
Right.
conscious mind, it's not that it's not unimportant. I'm not saying that at all. It's a huge ally when you have these insights and these ideas. Like, let's say in the middle of the night, you wake up with this really amazing idea and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a great, maybe it's a new product or an idea for a website or whatever it is. Now your conscious mind becomes a partner and it says, okay, let's see how we can get that done. What are the
Right.
steps
Take
that we need to
action.
take?
Go take
Correct.
action.
But there's a difference between action and inspired action. The
Oh,
inspiration comes from how you're feeling about it. So, I always tell people you get up sometime, and I've had these days, I get up and everything on my to do list for that day, I don't want to do any of them. And I wake up and go, oh my God, it's going to be one of those days, right? If I can just take a moment, because those things all have to be done, I have to take action on them, right? But if I can put myself in a place where I feel better, maybe I'll take 2 or 3 minutes and go through a photo album of last vacation. And you think, oh my gosh, that was so much fun. Remember how I felt? It was such a good time. Right away, I'm changing my perspective and my attitude. I'm changing my mindset. And now I can go to that to do list and be more inspired about it. And I tell my clients, if you can't find if you can't do that, you literally cannot do it, then call in sick and take the day off because your cup is empty and you need to
Oh,
recharge. And
got
most of
it.
the time, Einstein used to do this. Einstein didn't make most of his incredible discoveries and equations in his lab. He did them when he was out taking a walk in nature because the subconscious mind doesn't like a gun held to its head. The
No,
subconscious mind needs to process,
and
and it
neither
is
does your
processing
creativity. If your
correct
creativity is gone, I
because
stick my
that's the
head in the
home of your
fridge.
imagination. Yeah,
Right. I
that's
will
the
go
home
out
of
and
your imagination.
yep. I open up the refrigerator door. I stick as much of me as I can in it because it's a big double door. And I don't come back out until the doors start saying, close the doors. They start beeping.
And what you're doing is you are shifting your focus.
It's a mini
You,
break.
it's in NLP, we would call it a pattern interrupt.
Oh, there
All
you go.
right. We're shocking the brain into, I have this sometimes if I'm sitting, I don't care what kind of meeting, it's not necessarily a hypnosis, but I was in a business meeting one time and I won't say the company I was with, but I was there just for an initial consultation to see if I was going to be a good fit, to see what they needed, and then, if this was going to be a good relationship. And for like 15 minutes, these people um, talked about all their stuff. I didn't understand a word they said because they were talking in their corporate language, which believe me, these big companies, it's like Greek. And they're looking at me and they're like, well, what do you think? And I just busted out laughing. Like and they were like really physically leaned back, like I had just shot arrows at all of them or something. And it was like, I haven't understood a word you said. Do you realize how you're communicating with someone who is not in your culture? I don't understand that terminology. And there was like this dead silence. And then one of the guys started laughing. He's like, oh God, that makes so much sense. And he's like, this is why he was in marketing. He's like, this is why when I go to accounting, I don't understand a word they're saying. And I said, well, now you know how I feel. Like, but I'll do that when people get really long-winded and they're just going on, especially if it's a negative cycle. I'll just say, oh man, did you see the game last night? Like just something bizarre. And they'll
Break
look
the
at me,
cycle. Right.
but it is a pattern interrupt and it gets them out of that consciousness that's spinning that they were in, and you can then redirect them. So depending on the kind of client, I don't use something bizarre, but I will do some form of pattern interrupt, and we need to do that with ourselves. It's kind of like a
Yeah.
check-in. So for you, your tool is sticking your head in the freezer.
Yeah. I call it my mini refrigerator door meditation. I do it all
There
the
you
time.
go. Yeah,
And when
there
I
you
hear
go.
that beep, because I really just kind of tune out. And then I'll hear beep, 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 beep. It's like, all right, all right, all right. Give 5 more minutes. No, beep, 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 beep. And off it goes. And
And see
I
that's a
have to
trigger for
leave.
you.
Right.
That's a trigger.
But
Like
I
you
wanted
have
to,
associated things. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I wanted to go back to what we were talking about sleeping. And this is not a note that I had written to ask you about, but lucid dreaming. I'm a lucid dreamer
Hmm.
constantly. I have woken up sometimes where one time I was dancing on a wooden floor. I don't dance, but apparently I was, and I was barefoot, and I woke up tired with sore feet. Maybe I bilocated. I don't know what happened. But I have noticed when I'm lucid dreaming, which is every time I'm asleep without fail. And the last couple, 3 nights, I've had basically the same dream about the same person. Apparently, I don't like this person very much. And I didn't really understand that there were a lot of things about this person that I've got my hands kind of like, you said when those people look like you shot them with an arrow. That's how I view myself, like, why didn't you know this? So I'm paying attention.
So the brain and the subconscious mind, they can work in mysterious ways. All dreams are kind of like that. Um, you know, a lot of times our dreams may seem really weird to us, but there's something about them that resonates that we feel is kind of true somehow or has some kind of meaning. And when we dream, that's the time that we're reconsolidating things that have happened during the day. It's why
Oh,
people might show up in your dreams. My daughter's a neuroscientist, and her specialty is learning and memory. And so we have these very interesting discussions, the two of us. Don't always agree on things, but she's the scientist. I can be the woo, right? But there is interesting things that go on when we dream. And people say, "Well, I don't dream." Everybody dreams. You just don't remember them. So lucid dreamers, I think, are just those people that are better at remembering what they've dreamt. I'm not a dream expert. I mean, a lot of people think that goes hand in hand with hypnosis, doesn't have anything to do with it. But I get asked these questions a lot. It is a fascinating field of study. I look at it as, I don't know, I look at it as really woo because there's really, I don't know that there's science behind why we dream and all of that, but the what we dream and why, who knows? It's anybody's
yeah.
guess.
I don't even
Yeah,
try to figure it out. But when I'm having the same kind of gut impact, I pay attention. It's like, okay, there's something wrong here.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And, sometimes, I mean, gut feelings are important. Sometimes they're wrong, you know. But I think, again, the people, our subconscious mind communicates through the body, and it has many subtle ways of sending us messages if we are aware. And now we're back to that awareness. So, awareness of our thoughts and our emotions, they need to be congruent. That's a word that I use a lot because if they're not, it illustrates that disconnect, right? A lot of times when I was consulting with somebody the other day and they said, "Oh, I just offered my best employee a promotion." And I was so excited he's going to get a big raise. And when I brought him into the office to tell him about it, he wasn't happy. And I just couldn't understand. I thought he would be over the moon about it. And I said, "Well, how did you size up his reaction?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know. He really wasn't showing much at all." And I said, "Well, let's talk about the primary emotions that you find in the workplace. First one is what?" And he said, "Fear." I said, "Is this promotion going to require him to do something very different than what he's ever done?" "Well, yeah, it'll have a lot of new aspects." I said, "Do you
Mm.
think he might have been thinking to himself, 'I don't know if I can do this. What if I fail? If I fail, I might lose my job completely. Maybe I should stay where I am.'" And as soon as I started presenting all of these other possibilities to him, talking about fear, he totally got it. And he's like, "Oh," so I said, "How would you have, knowing what you know now, how, if you were to bring him in again to give him this promotion, what would you say to him?" And then he sat and went through the whole thing. Why he's doing it. "I want you to know you're going to have plenty of support. I'm going to send you to this 2-week training." Those are the things he really needed to hear in order to feel good about it. And I said, "Let me ask you a question. How long has he worked for you?" "Oh, he's worked for me for 15 years. He's a great employee." And I said, "Well, do you think he's also fearful that he might disappoint you?" And the guy just said, "Oh, God, I never thought about that." Yeah, he's the kind of guy that would worry about that. Like, there you go. So it's just these little tweaks sometimes of awareness that can make all the difference with how you handle certain situations, and how your staff, your employees, your peers, whoever it is that you're managing, how they feel about it, how your customer feels about it. So yeah, I think that this is just an essential tool. And you know what? Take it to the home front with your significant other, with your child, with your best friend. Emotional intelligence, these ideas are the same in our personal relationships, because it's all about building a better relationship with ourselves and then with others around us. And when we have those things, your business is going to be much more successful. It's just natural that that's going to happen.
And that makes sense. Roberta, we are rapidly running out of time, and I hate that. I would like for you to come back another time, probably in the new year, because I'm booked, I think, between now and December. But we have more to share, I think.
Oh, we do. I have so much to talk to you about.
Well,
So
in
yeah,
that case,
you call me and I'll be here. You just let me know.
okay, I will
This is
do that.
great. This is great. And I hope your audience has gotten something of value, because it's near and dear to my heart. It is my life's work, and I'm passionate about it, and wanting to help people reach their full potential,
Oh,
because that's
absolutely.
what life should be about.
Oh, I know. And so many people just at the end, they're like, what the heck did I get done? What did I do? It's sad. Listen, before we go, are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our audience? And where's the best place for listeners to connect with you and or learn more about your work?
The best place to connect is my website is robertafernandez.com. Pretty simple. And you can email me at robertafernandez.com. And if anybody out there would like an emotional intelligence assessment, I would be happy to send them one and offer them a 30-minute consultation, on the results and how I can help them improve them. Happy to
Excellent.
do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
No,
you.
proof's got to be in the pudding. And I believe in giving my best work, because that's the way you're successful, always doing your best.
You're exactly right. Well, listen, everybody, thank you for joining us today on Your Partner in Success Radio. My guest today, Roberta Fernandez, is an experienced corporate trainer and say this word for me, integrative. I don't know why I
Yes.
can't.
Yes. Integrative emotional intelligence specialist. Yep.
With a master practitioner certificate in NLP and credentials as a board-certified hypnotherapist. And she brings a unique, as you've heard, understanding of human nature to her work, and her diverse client portfolio includes Kemps, Sam's Club, Target for the rest of you, Optum, Pentair, government agencies, academic institutions, and private small businesses. And as a professional development consultant, Roberta assesses, at the end of the hour, I can't talk no more. It's over. She,
All
she,
good.
she assesses leaders and managers, offering recommendations to help organizations learn the 10 secrets of success of emotionally intelligent companies. And she guides teams in refining company culture. That's so important. And supports lasting transformation, helping you and your organization reach a new level of success. So we appreciate you listening. And I really hope that Roberta's insights inspire you to unlock your own potential. It took me way longer than it should have. So I'm glad she's here to help us. So thank you for joining us on Your Partner in Success Radio. And until next time, stay curious, keep taking bold action, and I will see you in the next episode. Roberta, thank you again, and you do need to come back.
Oh, I'll be back.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for having me, Denise.